Yeah, okay. Just another day of revelation. It's September 20th at 10:37 a.m. my time, and I just got news that the DOJ is bringing down indictments on a massive fraud. I think the largest so far involving pandemic aid in the state of Minnesota. Apparently, 244 million dollars was looted from Emergency CARES Act to feed children. Now, put this on top of the stuff that was revealed last week in Mississippi, where none other than good guy quarterback Brett Farve, guy that I loved in There's Something About Mary, and pretty much kind of formulated my attitude towards the guy. I mean, he was obviously a NFL Hall of Famer and just an amazing athlete. But he was involved with looting funds from federal funds that were sent to Mississippi to help families in need. And it was diverted to something under his name, I think, to provide funding for his daughter's volleyball team at Southern Mississippi University, and probably under his name. I don't know all the details, but it's just absolutely disgusting that somebody in that particular situation. I mean, come on, Brett, you can raise your own money. You got to loot it from federal government funds that are supposed to go to help families in need. Really, But I mean, the Griftopia is just insane, and the carnage that has enveloped this country. I mean, just in the last 2 years. I mean, PPP loans. We learned that there were billions upon billions of dollars immediately the day that these loans were made for small businesses, looted by giant organizations. And quite frankly, I know of a lot of law firms that got PPP loans to foreclose on people's houses illegally. I refer to these elements as, hyenas on crack, particularly in the finance industry. And so as huge as $244 million dollars and as despicable as, a guy who has as many resources and connections as Brett Farve does, to have to use a nonprofit president, Nancy knew. Think about this. And I've thought about this a long time, by the way, because I've been around nonprofits and rich people for a long time. I didn't trust a lot of nonprofit directors. I've been on the board of directors for different nonprofit organizations, and I've seen sometimes how things get a little funky. And, when you understand the big circumference of it, I mean, a lot of the times the people that gift this stuff, might be billionaires that are looking for tax write-offs. That's a lot of the time how we end up with names on stadiums. And then, the cities, create all sorts of different workarounds with taxes to be able to, basically loot city pensions to be able to provide for, professional franchises. I mean, it's the accounting that the professionals over the course of the last 30, 40 years have completely dismantled anything in this country that resembles a country that you think the United States is. Whether it's supply and demand, that, the best and the brightest bring the best products to market that become the most successful. That's not the story. I mean, from really the late 70s and 80s on, I mean, you've seen private equity and junk bond kings and hedge funds and all different degrees of inside pool and just insane three-dimensional chess that are basically setting up people through loans to be able to buy out existing businesses, to do all these complicated maneuvers just to basically create fees for those that are the ones putting all of this together, which ultimately led to the S&L crisis in the 80s, which was, I think, the test run for what ultimately would come. But we saw it in the 2000 tech bubble, and then we saw it again in the Enron era frauds that included WorldCom. This is 1998 to 2000 to 2004, and then all of a sudden we got the Great Financial Crisis. And the Great Financial Crisis was the mother lode because of just the amount of volume that was swept up in this entire madness that led to tens of millions of people being set up with illegal foreclosures, with illegal documents and illegal loans. Now, this is something that I think has to really resonate, particularly with those that I'm trying to motivate to get in the game. See, I think there's a lot of shame out there. There's a lot of people that are like, they don't want to publicly let people know that they got foreclosed on or something of that matter. And, people have horrible things happen to themselves. They tend to kind of go inside and they don't like to, advertise it, right? Everybody, I mean, just look around on Instagram and Facebook and everything else. Most people are living fairy tale lives, myself included to a certain extent. But the magnitude of the fraud, and a lot of people blame themselves, right? And I did too for a long time. It was like, okay, well, wait a second. If you sign a contract and you're on the hook for whatever they loan the amount to, there was real consideration that paid for that home, that got you in there, and they gave you the trust that you're going to pay based on those terms, right? Okay, fair enough. I always, when I went through it the first time, and I still believe this to a degree, although it's evolved, that, in the end, when I got foreclosed upon, I was just kind of like, you know what? I tried to modify the loan. I went through all of this stuff, and in the end, things didn't work out. And so, I lost, okay? But it wasn't until years later, because of that experience, that I understood that, oh my God, well, first and foremost, I got, into a loan that didn't, it wasn't everything that I understood it to be, because I didn't read through the 65 pages. But that's not what led to my demise. What led to my demise was that I ended up, not having income because the entire economy blew up and I couldn't afford the deal that I had. So I tried to modify it. And then ultimately I got put on what was called a trial modification. And then I paid that for 3 years. And then ultimately they got me mixed up with somebody else. And I knew that they didn't have my paperwork. And then I ended up walking away as a result of it, because I didn't want to fight. And I have since, met so many people, hundreds of people around the country that have fought for years and years and years, some just actually coming into this now, which shows you that the whole situation was recycled. So, for example, there was this, I'm getting off topic, but I'm going to try to keep it quick. There was a national mortgage settlement in 2012 that realized $25 billion from all of the financial institutions that was supposed to go into basically getting rid of all of the bad practices that had taken place that I was experiencing, that led me on this journey to make the con, but it never got fixed. And that kind of takes me back to another revelation in context to, all of the PPP loan grift, as well as, what just landed on the front page of the New York Times, that the DOJ is bringing indictments down on a grift that stole $244 million from CARES Act funds that were supposed to go to help needy children, starving children, children that are living in poverty, and in other programs. In fact, in the state of Utah, $69 million that was made available from the CARES Act to maintain people's mortgages and mortgage assistance, kind of like a lot of the other funds that came down through the COVID time period. It didn't get spent. It's still sitting on the sidelines. In fact, the Treasury Secretary of the state of Utah is like, yeah, no, it's there, and we're just about to put it into action. What? $69 million was provided to the state. Do you know how much money you can make from $69 million if you give it to your accountants and your financiers and they put it into whatever sort of investments they may have made $69 million since then, while it was intended to go to people in desperate straits. Okay, so putting the rewind button back to the 2008 great financial crisis, when President Obama came in, we had to create this emergency lending that Congress sold to the American people, or was sold to Congress, which the American people bought into, which was known as TARP. But then shortly afterwards, they made $50 billion available through what was known as HAM, Home Affordable Modification Program, that would have created modifications for people like myself who could afford it. In my situation was, I went from making, 6 figures to overnight I had to get 2 jobs and work around the clock just to maintain, basic nut, right? And so that's what I was dealing with at the time. And, my loan should have been modified. I paid for it for 3 years, 36 months. So that was money that was going into the kitty that was just basically setting me up to fail. So they got $36,000 extra dollars from me that I could have used to maybe put as a down payment somewhere else if I didn't go through bankruptcy. I don't know. There's all sorts of whatever on the personal level, but in terms of the big picture, again, the money at that time period, the $50 billion, just disappeared into the hyenas of servicers and foreclosure mills that were basically ripping people out of their houses with illegal documentation fraud made possible by 2 things: the real bailouts, which wasn't TARP, which wasn't, at the time they were talking about it was a liquidity problem and that the banks had to get liquidity, and that's how we had to provide $700 billion in liquidity and then buy the toxic assets off the books of the banks to put on the Federal Reserve's banks. That was the whole thing, and nobody asked questions. What that really meant was they did a backdoor to $29 trillion, which was really $30 trillion, which was used illegally to go into the coffers of the hyenas that pulled us off this thing. So what do you think is going to happen if you let the top mob boss get away with the crime of the century? Is he suddenly going to become reformed and everything is going to work out? No, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to continue to be this hyena freaking gang rape that destroys everything. And from where I'm coming from, and because I just have a basic knowledge of the history of the United States. I studied political science. I understand how the system's supposed to work. I know enough about the law to know when the law is not being exercised. And what does it all mean when you get to the end of it? Let me ask you the question. I want you to ponder this question. Put it in the goddamn comment section and tell the world what you know. So if, for example, tens of millions of people got set up on liar's loans, right? Regardless if they were stupid enough to get involved, okay? Yeah, if you're going to offer somebody who's in desperate straits food, do you think they're going to take it? If you offer them to take that desperate food and you're going to give them poison, are they at fault for dying from eating something that you set them up on? No, they're not. That's why there's a law to hold people accountable or institutions or businesses accountable if they indeed set a whole bunch of people up. And that's what we did. And we did it over and over and over in so many different, parts of the pipeline that we unpack completely in the con, www.thecon.tv. And apparently I'm the only one in the goddamn country that's willing to tell you this stuff, because where it all lands is Federal Reserve Act 13-3 was used illegally. Illegally, the full faith and credit of the United States was used to guarantee a criminal apparatus. And the Department of Justice did nothing. Now, this many years later, we're talking 13 years later, the Department of Justice out of Merrick Garland is going after Trump. I think there's like 6 different cases. I mean, the DOJ has one, and there's stuff that's happening in the Southern District of Manhattan. There's the New York AG. There's Georgia. There's other states. I mean, there's a whole periphery of things that Trump's involved with, and I don't think he's getting out of this. So the DOJ is doing its job right now, as are other government law apparatuses, AGs and that sort of thing, and DAs. But even if we get Trump, even if he ends up in prison, even if all of his, cadres who were involved with a coup d'etat and everything that involves, and I'm talking about the Koch brothers, and I'm talking, one of the Kochs is dead, but the Koch organization, the Mercers, obviously Blackwater and Eric Prince and all the rest. Let's just say they do this ground sweep and they get everybody, right? That's still not even fucking remotely close to even dealing with the shit that happened since 2020, PPP loan fraud, all of the hyenas and the. So my point is, if you're going to have this financial apparatus that can lie, steal, and deceive their way to trillions of dollars, what precedent does that send? We're a country of opportunists. There's a lot of smart people in this country, clever as hell and relentless. And if you hang out, and we're sharks, and most of us are. I wouldn't say most, but there's a lot of us. You hang out and dangle a piece of red meat and, give people incentives to be able to go get that meat. They're going to take it, right? So they've learned over and over and over, whether it was hemp, which ultimately then leads into quantitative easing, that the government spent trillions of dollars to pick up so-called toxic assets, which were basically foam on the runway, which was the American people, for the financial system, which just raped and pillaged everyone. It's a crime syndicate. It's not some guy in the fucking shadows and some evil, deceptive villain that you can't see. You just refuse to see it because you don't have the intelligence to unpack what's right in front of your fucking eyes. Like I said on Facebook earlier today, I'm like, yeah, there is a boogeyman. There is a machine behind the curtain. It's called the Federal Reserve. And they're in front of your fucking face every single day. You just don't know what they do and how they do it. That's what I'm trying to educate you on, so that we can create a populist revolution that basically purges corruption. Because if you have a corrupt state, that's what we were born and we rebelled against, because, yeah, we fought King George III. I mean, that's really what the misnomer is, but it was Parliament of the UK, and it was also the East India Trading Company. And this grand larceny of basically, looting from the the colonies. And they just finally were like, fuck your Stamp Act, fuck your Tea Party and all the rest of it. We're going to be independent. And they figured it out. And by the way, it wasn't easy because there's so much history just between 1776 and let's just call it 1787 and then 1801 and that time span. It's practically chaos. And it's amazing that we pulled it off. So when we say things like, we're liberty and justice for all and that the integrity of law and we have the central order and, all of these things, it was never perfect. There was a lot of bargains. There was a lot of this and that, and sometimes luck, and sometimes a lot of it based on just incredibly intelligent and ambitious people that made incredibly glorious things happen. There's a lot of bad things that happen at the same time. I remind myself of that all the time when I get frustrated with people out there that can't seem to get off their ass and fucking even share the knowledge of what we're sharing with you so that we can be like water and get through the freaking iron gates and the walls and of dystopia that want to make sure that you, the people, don't have the information that you need because the press, the media, they're all in on it. They get paid to make sure you do not understand the system is fucking there to rape you and pillage you, and you're expendable. Why are you going to allow them to do that to you? Especially if you went through the system or going through it now. Why? What I learned a long time ago, I learned this in freaking 3rd grade. You cannot fight on your heels. You cannot fight when you hide from the bully. I was always the first guy that fucking sucker punched the bully in front of the biggest crowd of people because I wanted to send a message, and I've been doing that since freaking grade school. Am I violent? Am I, some sort of crazy, revolutionary that's, off with their heads? No, I'm not that stupid. And I'll tell you why. Because me on my own could never in a million fucking years doing it. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't want that anyway. I want to establish the rule of law and make this clear to the American people so that we can rip the freaking hyenas of madness out of their cocoons of power that have corrupted the entire place, take back everything that they stole, and send their motherfucking asses to prison. That's who I want to be. That's who I attempted to be, but I can't do it when you look in circles like, who's going to save us? The system's going to save us. You got a choice between, what does Biden always say? This is a fight for democracy against fascism. What are you, a special kind of stupid? No, it's the robber barons, the new robber barons versus the new Confederacy, and they all operate because of the corruption that I've let you know about. At least, to give a little kudos to the Confederates, at least you're ambitious. At least you're willing to fight for your vision of things, and you always have. So what's wrong with the rest of you? What's wrong with the rest of you? Do you have any idea what freedoms you got and how you got them? Were you on the streets during the labor rights movements? Were you in the streets during the, the women's suffrage? Were you in the streets for civil rights? Were you in the streets for trust busting? And then ultimately the New Deal? Did you fight in World War II against fascism? None of us did. Maybe your grandparents did, and they already fought that fight, and they wanted for us to inherit. But we let it all slip through our fingers because we're ill-informed. I don't want to call you stupid because most of this stuff is asymmetric information. You know what you know. But I said this on Twitter the other day, and I think this is kind of a good way to look at it. A firefighter heroically extinguishes fires. They don't extinguish arsonists. That's not their job. The job are the investigators and different, apparatuses that are part of law enforcement that are supposed to, they're called regulators, to hold this power to account. And when they break the law, they're supposed to go to jail. That's what the DOJ might be doing to a certain degree, but it's not enough and it's too slow and it's, not even remotely going to fix the problem. Regardless if you go after a bunch of bad actors in Minnesota for stealing from children, or Brett Farve and Nancy, who's supposedly a nonprofit, leader, really? Those people are disgusting. Stealing from children. Are you fucking kidding me? But it doesn't end there. We put elderly women who own their homes into the streets because it was stolen from them by this madness, which is what we show in the con, among other things. Guys, pull your head out of your ass.